Hi there. Today we are baking again.
No.
And yeah, no, we are. And easy, easy, easy. Please don't run away just because I used the B word. So I love to bake. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. We have a bunch of plums in the garden because we have a plum tree. Not as much as last year. Whoa, back here. Not as much as last year, but we do have plums, and we have the Italian prune plums that are perfect for this. But the recipe, the reason I wanted to share this recipe with you, this was a New York Times recipe from a woman named Marian Burros, and it's from the early 80s.
Oh, the Burros of New York? Oh, sorry.
I really don't know. And it's from the early 80s, and I remember my mother making this cake, and there are iterations all over the internet with various different changes to them. People have adapted this in so many different ways. The easiest way, instead of plums, use another fruit, right? People have put whole grain or partially whole grain flour in here. I'm going to use white flour. You can change out the spices. You can do all sorts of things with it. And it's super easy and has very few ingredients, many of which you probably, if not all, have in your house anyway. But I wanted to do, I made my own adaptation. So this recipe is not one I've seen. It's the same basic recipe, but the thing that I changed was the fat that we're using. So the recipe is always called for butter. And while this can't be vegan because it has eggs in it, I wanted to see what it was like with olive oil instead of butter. And it turns out I love it. I like it as much, maybe more. It's different than if you use butter. But it's very, very nice. And one of the things that I like about it is I always have olive oil and I don't have to worry about softening it, you know? And I hate measuring butter. I don't like to soften butter. I find it kind of a pain. Plus,
you just hate baking, I think.
And no, I love it. Butter, our butter tends to be more expensive than the olive oil. Now, if you don't like the taste of your olive oil, it's not going to work. You're not going to like this. Now, I'm not saying use your very best olive oil here, but I am saying if you don't like the taste of olive oil, if you've had like an olive oil cake before and you didn't like the taste of it, obviously this isn't going to work for you. But we thought it paired really well.
Could you use coconut oil?
You could. That would be closer to butter.
Right.
And you'd probably sub in the same amount. So yes, you could definitely, maybe not by weight, maybe by volume. And both measurements will be down below. Another reason I like the olive oil is because it makes this super easy to do by hand. Originally, I always did this recipe in our KitchenAid, and I understand that a lot of you probably don't have a KitchenAid, and you may have the ver hand thing. That's the official term, the ver hand thing. But if you don't even have that, you can make this.
And that electricity is expensive
by
too.
hand. You can make this by hand. Yeah. So we're going to start really, really simply by putting some sugar.
That'll be sugar.
It is, into a bowl.
Paging Pablo Escobar.
Oh no. And then we're going to add our olive oil here. And get out as much as you can there.
Now, my mom always used to say you have to use a spatula because you'd be surprised how much is left in there.
You know, your mom was right.
Yeah, my mom was right. My mom
it is kind of amazing.
One of the few things she was correct about.
Oh, please. And we're preheating the oven to about, I think it's 180 Celsius, which is like 350 Fahrenheit. And what I'm doing, and if you were doing this in a mixer, this is where they say cream the butter and the sugar together until it's light and fluffy.
Oh, it's looking light and fluffy.
And so I find if you're doing it by hand, the olive oil helps with that. It's a little bit of a workout.
Notice your right arm is significantly more developed in the bicep area.
Yeah, that's right. Not really. So, you know, yeah, like I said, I've used apples in here. If you use apples because they're not as soft as plums, you might want to cut them thinner. You can use peaches and nectarines here. You could use pears. You could use berries. I saw one version of this that called for cranberries, which I think would be really nice. You certainly could use chopped up rhubarb, although you might want to increase the sweetness. I'm not really sure there.
So almost any fruit is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, you can pretty much do what you want. Like I said, it is incredibly adaptable. Okay, so that's well combined. Is it light and fluffy? Well, it's kind of hard to do light with olive oil, but that's okay. That works for me.
It's integrated.
So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the eggs. And yeah, I do it on the side. I know everybody these days says, "Oh no, you must do it on the flat." Sorry, this is how I've been doing it.
There's a big debate between Julia Child and Jacques Pepin about that, actually.
Well, I've been doing it this way my whole life, and it's very rare.
Julia was an edge breaker, and I think Jacques was a table breaker. I think
Well, these days it seems like on food cooking shows that most people are flat, not edge.
There was actually a fist fight about it. Julia took him 2 out of 3 falls.
Well, that's not surprising. Did you see how big she is?
She moose with
Was?
lipstick. She was amazing.
Lovely one, but very tall. So, see how that's coming together there? Already looking nice, like a batter, right? Like a cake batter should, oughta. It smells fairly strongly of olive oil because, of course, our olive oil is,
That's the main ingredient.
well, not the main, but yes. So, the next thing I'm going to do, so that's where we stop with the whisk. I should have said we were using a whisk. That is the best way to do the creaming aspect there. So, now what we're going to do is deal with the all the powdery ingredients here. Actually, not those, not all of them. So, we have some flour here, and this is just, ours happens to be an organic, unbleached white flour, but you could probably do half white, half whole wheat pastry flour, something like that if you wanted to put some whole grains in there, but it's really up to you. This is baking powder, not baking soda. That's about a teaspoon of it, and I'm just sprinkling it over the top there. You could mix your dry ingredients in a separate bowl, but I gotta tell you what I hate about that is then you have 2 bowls to clean. And this is a large pinch of salt. I'm just gonna sprinkle that in. The reason that you would mix your floury items in one thing and your liquid in another is so that you don't have any chunks of, say, baking powder, right? I'm pretty good at that. In fact, you could even sort of stir it a little over the top to make sure it
Yes,
blends in.
pants.
But the thing is, the reason we're moving on here to the spatula instead of the whisk is because once your eggs are in there and once you're getting your flour in there, you don't want to overbeat your flour because you're going to develop the gluten, and that's awesome for bread baking, but it's not for cakes. Cakes you want to be tender. So we're just kind of doing a sort of a folding technique.
Combining, as it were.
And if you were to do this in a mixer, I would say just mix it until combined, right? Do not over mix at this point.
When you said you were doing it by hand, I thought you were going to get in there with your hands. Like,
oh no, that's true. I've been saying everything that I do I like to be tactile, but not in this case. Okay, I'm just making sure that I'm not seeing any white bits. Oh, there's
a couple
one.
of white bits.
There's one. Okay.
Nice texture. Okay.
So,
Okay.
that's the cake bit. You need a pan. This is a springform pan like cheesecake is usually made in, where the bottom comes out like that. But you don't need that. If you have a pan, it doesn't matter if it's round, it doesn't matter if it's square. This is another one of these adaptations with this particular recipe. I'm not saying to do this with all recipes. Doesn't matter if it's round, doesn't matter if it's square, anywhere between 8 and 10 inches. Okay, so this is, I believe this is a 10-inch springform. So, and it doesn't need to be greased. It doesn't need to be...
With olive oil?
So many cakes that I make, even with loads of butter in them, you either, grease it, you lay down paper in it, you have to flour it, all that sort of stuff. None of that is happening here. We're just going straight in with the batter.
We're going to the pan.
If you're making this with butter, it's not going to have this yellowish green. It'll be a lighter color is what I'm saying. Butter definitely would make it lighter than this. And all I'm doing is scooping it out, making sure we get every bit of batter.
Reminds me of early baby days in the...
Oh
change table.
do not go down that path, Mr. Bailey.
Well, it
That's not
tastes
nice.
significantly better from my experience.
You were tasting? We need to talk.
It's been a while, I can confess it now.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm just making sure that it reaches the sides of the pan and that I'm getting everything off of the spatula, or majority of it. Now,
Very nice.
once you've got that ready to go, then the next step is to put the plums or whatever fruit you have on. Now, originally I did this lovely pattern where it's all coming out like flower petals and it looks so pretty. Yeah, the problem is what happens is this batter raises up and over and the plums kind of get submerged and you lose your pattern. So don't worry about that. Just fit as many darn plums on there, and all I've done is cut them in half.
Remove the stone.
Taking the pit out, and that's it.
And this is good when they're a little on, even on the overripe side too, right?
Actually, it's even good if they're a little on the underripe side, both.
But
so,
if you're wondering what to do with slightly overripe
yep.
plums, this is a great solution for it. Right?
Yep. And that one just fell in, and that's fine too. Like, this is so forgiving. I have yet to mess this recipe up, even though I think that I might. And then it doesn't happen, so.
Yeah, forgiveness in baking is not often used in the same sentence.
Yeah, but for this one, it really is. I can fit more in. That's so funny. I could have put couple more in there.
It's still rather
but I'm not
symmetrical.
going to. Because usually I get about a dozen in, and that's what that is.
What's that
So
now?
this is lemon juice.
Oh.
And and you can make it without the lemon juice, but it does give it a nice little thing. If I was making this with rhubarb, I'd probably leave it out. All I'm doing is sort of sprinkling it, try making it evenly over the top. Now, this is an interesting bit. The original recipe, apparently from the New York Times, called for 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and somewhere along the line it got sort of changed, and some recipes said 1 tablespoon, and Smitten Kitchen has a whole thing that she's written up on this. I prefer the 1 tablespoon, as does she. So just, it's a lot of cinnamon. But if you don't like that much, don't use that much. And also, the cinnamon is going to make it look black and burnt when it comes out. It's freaked me out a couple of times, and every time I think, uh-oh, this time I burnt it. Nope, never have.
But you were forgiven.
No, I never have. It's the cinnamon does that. If I were to change the spice here, say I wanted to put cardamom in this instead, I would not use anywhere near this amount. If I was doing cardamom, I would sprinkle half teaspoon, maybe 3/4 of a teaspoon over the top. I wouldn't even do a full teaspoon, let alone a tablespoon. Then we got a couple of tablespoons of sugar, and whether you use 1 or 2 depends on how sweet your fruit is or how much you like a crackling top.
Ooh, I like a crackling top.
It's nice to have that kind of crust, and the sugar does that with the lemon juice and the cinnamon, and that creates this lovely crust. So this has been a go-to for a long time. I was just saying to Rob this morning, I didn't want to do it for the video because I haven't tried it out myself yet, but I wonder if I could make little tortettes.
Tortettes. They were a famous dance group from New York. Right?
By using a muffin pan. And if I put a small amount of batter in each muffin tin and then put, say, 1 plum halved, so 2 halves, on top of each one, and then people could have individual ones and do the lemon juice and the sprinkling, the cinnamon sugar over each, it might be really nice. But I haven't done that yet, so I don't know the baking times. So you can try it, and if you do, please leave me a note below because I'd love to hear about it. I figured they'd be really nice for freezing. Oh, by the way, this does freeze well, so we're gonna pop it in the oven that's preheated, and we will be back when it's ready to go, which is about 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and we'll show you what it looks like then, and it won't be burnt. So that's been 45 minutes, and I wanted to show you what it looked like. I think I realized why it looked burnt before. See this dark along here? That's what I'm talking about, but that's not burnt, that's cinnamon. And I think it's the order you do it in. I'm wearing my glasses, I'm not supposed to be right now. Ordinarily, I think what I do is I do the sugar and then the cinnamon on top. But what I showed you was correct, which is you do the cinnamon and then you do the sugar.
Right.
Less likely to burn that way. So it doesn't burn. It just looks like it's burnt, and so it doesn't look as appetizing. What I did want to show you, so I've got a metal skewer here. You can use a toothpick or whatever you want. And I just want to show you what it looks like when you put it in and you bring it out. That is done. There's nothing.
Nothing sticks to it?
There's a tiny little crumb there, but that's not enough to be worried about. So I'm gonna let this sit on the cooling rack I have here. If you don't have a cooling rack, that's fine. You can put it on the element of your stove, as long as air can get sort of around it is what you're trying to go for 10 to 15 minutes before I do anything else to it. Then I take a knife around the outside and just make sure that I can release it from the outside. If you're doing this in a square like a brownie pan, you can put a knife around the outside and then cut it into squares. This we usually do in wedges. I highly recommend saving some for tomorrow because I think it's even better the next day. It does this fleshy thing overnight that's kind of nice. And also it's very freezable. What I would do is I would take it out of the pan and then cooled completely, of course, and then you can wrap it in plastic wrap and then maybe even foil on top of that and mark it well so you know what it is and pop it in the fridge, and the next time you have company come over, you can thaw it out and you can have dessert ready to go and you didn't even have to make anything. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. Baking's not hard. Why don't you try it yourself?